Coming here to the United States, you felt that it would be a different place. You wouldn't have the kind of discrimination that you faced in that was going on in Lebanon as Muslim Lebanese.
Yes, coming to United States, it's freedom. It's leaving a war-torn country, coming to United States to start a new chapter in life, to have a family, to live and achieve the American dreams. But after experiencing what I experienced, it was very shocking. The best country in the world, yet their mind is way backward about to just to think about your nationality, to think about your religion, to just judge you based on that. It's like they don't give you a chance to prove yourself. They don't give you a chance that, hey, I came like everybody else. I worked hard. I never opened my hand to anyone. I worked hard. I went to school. I put myself through school. I paid for my own education. They don't see that. They don't see hard working. Just they look at you, they see religion, color, ethnicity. And that was very disappointment and shocking.
And this is in a place, we're talking about San Jose, Silicon Valley, which is filled with immigrants. I mean, this is a large number of the people who built these companies, Silicon Valley, and built America, not just as companies, but America, are immigrants.
You're right. And it's very disappointing because it contradicts itself. Yet here you get Silicon Valley built by immigrants, but yet you get some discrimination within the police department, closed walls, where they think it's funny, it's a joke. They want to brush it off as a joke, not something serious. No one asked me about how I felt. No one came and say, how you feel about that? Does it affect you personally, emotionally? Everything is, they shame you and blame you. What about me? Why didn't you come and ask me? Yes, the police department opened an investigation. It's been almost a year. And since then, no one called me. Not even chief, deputy chief, a captain, lieutenant. No one called me saying, how you feel, Nabil?
So, and they're probably spending a lot of money on lawyers to fight you and fight this lawsuit rather than just settle and say, we did wrong, let's take you back to work and let's move on, and we don't want this to happen again.
And that's what we want. We want accountability. We want to hold themselves accountable for what happened. If they took care of it right away, we won't be in this situation. The event in January, it won't happen. If the chief came down right away and reminded everybody with a policy, we won't be standing here. But nothing happened. And what that? It sent a message, it's okay. Continue, say and do. It's another day. It's funny. It's a joke. But what about me? Nothing.
And for other Muslim Americans, what does that say about any other Muslim American who would apply to the San Jose Police Department? It'd be a kind of a frightening situation if you're going to have that kind of incidents.
And that's absolutely right. And that's what we need. We need to start reaching out to those communities. We need to change the perception. We need to change the stereotyping and try to send a message. Everybody's welcome. Everybody have a chance. Like I had a chance coming to this country. Everybody has a chance to become what they want to become. I don't want to tell my son, oh, don't become a police officer. because that's what it's gonna happen to you. No, I want to fight and I want to change things. So another immigrant who sits in the front in the police department doesn't have to suffer what I suffered, doesn't have to experience what I experienced.
So you want them to follow the law basically and do what they should be doing.
Exactly, exactly. Just follow the policies. That's easy. Hold themselves accountable. Those command staffs, they need to hold themselves accountable. Until now, they have not.
And this lawsuit now, you want your job back, you want to be compensated for your losses, and you think that you were talking about the blue line. Do you think that they would be accepting? I mean, if you did win.
The whole lawsuit to me is to make awareness what's going on. Doesn't mean if we are in Silicon Valley and it's diverse, those things not gonna never happen. Look what's going on around the country. Priests, all their lives, and now sexual assaults coming out. And we thought, oh, priests, they couldn't do anything wrong. We all make mistakes. We all have our fault. But it does. Racism, harassment, discrimination, it does exist everywhere. And you need to bring it up to the front to send a message that's zero tolerance, no more. 21st century. The first, when I was in a briefing room, and it was during a day before Veterans Day, and then the captain was thanking all the veterans, police officer veterans who served in the army, in the Marine, and so forth. And then the captain said, "Did I miss anyone? Who's veteran?" I didn't mention their name. And the briefing sergeant, he said, "Captain, you forget to mention Nabil. He's been with ISIS for 2 years." So everybody laughed.
He's been with ISIS for 2 years. You've been a terrorist for 2 years.
Yes, and yes, I'm wearing a police uniform, and
I mean, the idea of calling you a terrorist as a professional police officer in the city of San Jose.
Yes, and then everybody started laughing, and instead the captain to say something, "Hey, I need to talk to you. This is unacceptable." He started laughing, and
He thought it was a joke too.
yes, it was. He thought it was funny, and he was laughing so hard that his face turned red, and he was pointing at me. And bear in mind, it's a briefing which is about 80 people, and you get all new recruits who sit in the front, starting their career. To them, what kind of message are you sending to this new recruit? It's okay to call somebody ISIS?
So this is their training of the new recruits.
It's kind of like sending a message. It's acceptable to say that. And now what is this recruit's going to get the message? He's going to go out there in the field, going to some calls, and it's happened if somebody from India or from Muslim country, they might say, "Oh, are you ISIS?" They might think it's acceptable, it's funny, but it's not. And then it continued, and same thing went down on the second floor for lunch, and I walked up to the same sergeant, and I told him, "You know what you said is liability." He said, "Well, you're not a protected citizen. You're nobody. Keep going, pal." And everybody started laughing. And then sit down to eat with a fellow officer. The deputy chief walks in. He's laughing because they told him what happened in briefing. He thinks it's funny. I told him, he sit across of me. I told him what happened, and I told him, hey, officer heard it and saw it. His reply was, saw you where? In Iraq, fighting with ISIS?
So it sounds like it's a big joke. They're making a big joke.
Who do I go to? If it's from the sergeant all the way to the deputy chief, think it's a joke. Who do I complain to? That's proved me that there's nobody to I cannot complain to no one.
It's the top management of the San Jose Police Department.
Yes.
And on Martin Luther King Day?
Martin Luther King Day, when I was on a call, it came burglary in progress. I get there, officers were already at the scene. I was securing a suspect who was sitting on the curb, and another officer comes out of the apartment, and as soon as he looks me while he's walking toward me, as he saw me, he goes, "Li, li, li, li," and poof, initiating as he's a suicide bomber. I was in disbelief, and I say, what's that again? He does it again. And then further he goes and he asked me if that knife, was secured on my holster, if it's a Lebanese throat cutter. And he starts laughing, and then he gives me the finger.
And this is all on video.
That's all on video. And then he asked me if I am a field training officer, and I said no. And he said I should be one because I will be a great field training officer because I can teach those recruits how to be a jihadi shit and how to make pipe bombs. It was disgusting.
It sounds like it's out of control.
Well, it does. It is out of control. They feel so free to say those things with no consequences. Who in his right mind will say that to a fellow officer in uniform, a senior officer? I am more senior than him, and he tells me that, and then he gives me the finger. He must heard it before. He must saw it. He must saw or heard what happened in briefing room, and he thought it's acceptable with no consequences because his superiors are doing it. So if you don't hold yourself accountable, that's what's going to happen. When these officers, they see what's happening, what the superiors, the command staff are doing, and not holding themselves accountable, it's acceptable for them. And that's what's happening. And if I didn't come forward, who knows?
But you can't live with this.
No, I can't. It's become unbearable. It's like a pressure, You keep inside. But throughout the years, each time they say something, it's like somebody chipping on your soul. It's like they killing your spirit little by little. It kills your spirit, chipping at your soul to a point where you cannot take it anymore. Become unbearable. And you have to stand up and say something, especially 21st century. What's going on around the country, especially if regarding back in the Middle East, regarding ISIS, regarding the politics, regarding what's going on here, that people will get the message is unacceptable. No. Actually becoming more right in your face after our president. If he does tweeting and does things and say things on Twitter, hey, it's okay, I can say it too. And for the next immigrant who's going to become a police officer, what happened for somebody who's coming from the Middle East and he has the same dream as mine? And that's what we are now. Further down in January, after the incident happened, nothing happened. There were no policy to remind the officers, to command staff, hey, there is policy exists. Please bear in mind those kind of behavior, zero tolerance, nothing. January, Martin Luther King. I was dispatched to a burglary in progress. And when I got there were officers already on the scene. So one of the officers who was with his recruit, he told me to watch the suspect. So I was watching the suspect while the officer and his recruit went into the house. I was by myself watching the suspect. Another officer exited the house or the apartment, and as soon as he saw me, he goes, li, 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 poof, as implicating he's a suicide bomber. And kind of like I said, what's that? And again, he does it, li, 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 and explode, poof, as a suicide bomber. Bear in mind, we had our cameras, rolling. We have the camera, the recorder, that police officer.
So you were wearing that?
I was wearing that, and it was still going on, recording.
So when you were at your first incident where they basically insulted you and made a joke about you, wasn't that kind of saying to the other officers there that this kind of behavior is appropriate?
Well, if you put it, there's nobody in the right mind, on the first time that sergeant will stand there and say it. This has been happening for a long time, and that sergeant felt so free to say it in front of command staff with no consequences.
How many people were at that meeting?
There were about 80, including command staff. For somebody to say it with no consequences, to feel free to say this kind of comment in front of captains and lieutenants with no consequences, for any person with common sense, this has been happening for a while. Especially a sergeant who's on probation. He just got promoted to a sergeant, and where you have to follow the rules and make sure what you do, everything is right, so you won't lose your probation, you won't get demoted.
So what was the name of this sergeant?
La Barbera.
So he was on probation.
He was on probation.
And he made these comments.
And he was his comment. So we go forward to January. The officer made that comment, and further, I had a knife secured on my belt, duty belt, and he looks and he say, "What is this? Is this a Lebanese throat cutter?" And he proceed and he gives me the finger on the camera. And then he asked another
So this is all being recorded.
Yes. And then he asked an officer who was standing there as a witness, and he asked him if he was a field training officer. So the officer responded yes, and then he asked me if I was a field training officer, and I said no. And then he said, "Oh, you should be a field training officer because you can teach those new recruits how to be, excuse my language, jihadi shit, and how to make pipe bombs." It was disgusting. It was.
So after this incident where you were made a joke of and your ethnicity was made a joke of, how did other officers in the department treat you? Was there any difference?
Well, after I came up with my lawsuit, it's like walking on eggshells. You don't know who's gonna be say hi, and you don't know who's gonna ignore me.
It's a stressful atmosphere.
It is very stressful. It's like walking to unknown. I don't know what's gonna happen. Officer might understand, and I do, a lot of officers came and they support me with my case. On the
So there was support from some
yes,
officers.
there were support.
What did they say?
Uh, e- they say it's good for you. We understand the experience. We understand what you're going through, but you have to understand police culture is totally different. It's that blue line, blue wall, where you are labeled if you are with us or you are against us. If you come forward with a problem or with anything that they don't agree, you become the problem. Instead to be a transparency, a smooth process, it becomes a problem. They shame you and blame you.
So they want you out, basically. You don't fit in.
Uh,
That's what they're saying. You don't fit in with the culture and the way the department runs.
for some people, I think they rather me be out.
And the chief of the San Jose Police Department, what did that person say? Was that person aware of what was going on?
He was aware from, I'm not sure about the second incident, but the first incident, he was aware. But that's a good question to ask him, what was the consequence? What did he do? So far, I haven't heard anything from the case. I haven't had any closure, any findings. Usually, they should let the victim know. But now,
Was there an internal investigation?
there was internal investigation. It started, but I'm not sure if it's already done or still going on. And this is almost a year. But the policy, it said that when it's open investigation regarding harassment or discrimination, it take precedent over any other cases with the internal affair. But apparently, this case didn't take any.
And I mean, do you know of other people who have similarly been affected as a result of discrimination because of being Muslim American?
Well, I am the only Muslim Muslim American on the police department. First generation, came here at 18, speak, write, read Arabic. To know other Muslims, I'm not sure if you have other Muslims on the police.
I mean, there's a large Muslim American community in the South Bay from all over the world, India, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan.
Yes, there are, and it's very sad that we don't have Muslims on the police department.
I mean, that's a part of the community
Yes.
in San Jose, isn't it? That you would want to have Muslim Americans who are in the police department.
Yes, but it's very sad that we don't have. And I'm not sure what's the chief's goal about that. And I hope that by the time I leave, that we'll see more Muslim on the police department.
And you want to go back to work there. And you don't want to be discriminated against.
Of course, I want to go back. I want to work. Most of San Jose police officers are hardworking officers, and they serve their community 100%. But there are few officers who needs to be identified and disciplined and educated regarding what's going on around the country, regarding discrimination, racism.
And I mean, it seems like the atmosphere now, particularly of a president, and is to blame or stereotype immigrants from Muslim countries and even discriminate about the right to come here. How that's also affected your family and many other Muslims, millions of Muslims around the world.
Yes, and that's what I believe what happened during November 10 and Martin Luther King Day. To me, it got to a point, it's like after Donald Trump become president, now people really become right in your face. They say it, and they don't care. If the president's saying and doing things, they feel like, hey, I can do it and say it right in your face with no consequences.
So this is acceptable, to be stereotype people, to be racist, and to insult people.
Well, apparently, if the president is doing it, the people believing it's becoming acceptable.
And are there, I mean, the police department should be having incidents of discrimination, of racism. What does the police department do around those issues in San Jose?
Well, that's a good question to ask the chief. You know, I can tell you from my experience, so far nothing happened. There's policy exists, policy written with a manual of the city of San Jose and the San Jose Police Department. But so far I haven't heard anything.
So do you feel that this blue line, that you shouldn't challenge the police department and the policies of the police department, is the reason that the police department is not really, and the management is not really saying enough is enough? We can't have discrimination. We can't have insults against officers because of their ethnic origin and making jokes about them and that kind of thing. It sounds like it's okay for people from Muslim countries to be made a joke of.
Well, that's what I'm standing up for, is to send a message that saying things shouldn't be tolerant, should be zero tolerance. And for somebody in uniform to call another person in uniform and have a gun to say things regarding the religion and ethnic, imagine how this officer treats the public. If he has the guts to tell me this,
And you're in the department.
and I am a senior officer too. I have more seniority than him. So if he has the guts to tell me that, imagine if the same officer responds to a call where there's a Muslim family or Hindu family or Sikh family, how he treats them. And that's what I'm standing up for, is to let him know this is unacceptable.
I'm Shiela Haidar. And watching my husband go through this has been really a roller coaster for us. Like he said, neither of us have our family out here, and we have young children at home. So they could see there was a degree of stress and unrest going on, but they weren't too sure what was going on. But yes, it's affected us, and when I did share it with my teenage sons, they were baffled and just shocked that this would be going on in the police department. I'm trying to raise my sons to be respectful of police officers, and at the same time, it's hard when we see that the command staff is not holding themselves accountable. That's just really shocking to us. But our family, in the last 2-3 years, just seeing where the culture and the environment, the way it's become very anti-Muslim, anti-Middle Eastern, is very shocking. And for me, I'm not Muslim, actually. I'm Christian, and I take my children to church. And I still stand up for the rights of Muslims, because this is not right, the way they treat my husband or any Muslim, or even the people who are not even Muslim get, and they think they are, and they still get discriminated and harassed. It's just wrong.
And San Jose is really an international community. I mean, there are people from all over the world, Muslims, Asians. I mean, it's quite an international community.
You know, we were talking about that. We, as a family outside, navigating through San Jose, we've never been harassed or made fun of because of our race or religion. This is really an internal, within the walls of San Jose Police Department. Like he said, the police culture is unique, it's different. And apparently they treat each other at a different level than what is acceptable outside of those walls. Because if you look at the city of San Jose and their police department, they're very proactive recently. They're very pro-diversity. They recently had Boba with a Cop, where they went into the Vietnamese community, and that's all great from the outside. they need to hold their people accountable inside.
And when this incident happened with your husband, where he was made a joke of at this meeting, was senior officers, senior staff there, did he let you know about that?
Well, that happened on a Friday. He was so distraught that he couldn't verbalize it to me until 2 days later. But me being his wife of now 18 years, I knew something was wrong. Something was not right.
He couldn't talk about a terrible thing that happened to him.
No, he couldn't, and I could tell he was not sleeping. And but I needed him. I gave him the room and the space to be able to come to me and tell me what was going on. So he finally told me 2 nights later, and we both cried in the living room because I was like, "This is 2017. This should not be happening to you." And I love my husband. I respect him 110%. And to see that he was mocked and just belittled like that in front of almost 100 people, that's just humiliating. And for them to still not do anything about that as we speak, it just makes every day that much harder for us.
And I mean, it sounds like, as he was saying, it's not just about him, but the way they treat people in the community. If they treat him like that, I mean, then they really don't respect people in the community who are of a different nationality or different ethnic.
I don't know how anyone can turn that switch on and off. You're right. I mean, if that's how they treat Nabil at work, perhaps they think that they're going to put on a facade in the community. But I think at some point, they themselves, if they have those, implicit biases, explicit biases, it's going to show at some point in time. You can only hide that kind of thing for so long.
And I mean, what's going on now? I mean, against immigrants, against Muslims, against the government now is saying that wives can't stay here, and it seems like the whole atmosphere has changed. I mean, from the United States being a welcoming country to people to saying, we don't want you, we really don't want you, we're going to put up all kinds of roadblocks. What does that say about America for you?
It's really saddening, actually, because if he or I were to go back to our home countries, actually they would see us as Americans. And then when we're here in America,
But you are Americans, aren't you?
right, they would see us as Americans. They wouldn't accept us necessarily. They would kind of see us more as, oh, you're American, you've already progressed. You're not really part of this part of the world anymore. But here in America, they don't see us as Americans. We're foreigners. And so for us, we kind of feel like, where's our home? We're not too sure. And that is it's very sad. Like, the way that our families sees what's going on in America, they've asked us, do you hate us? Because what they're seeing on TV, they see that Americans hate Muslims, they hate people from the Middle East. And my sister-in-law said, do you and your kids hate us? And I'm like, why would you ask me that? And she goes, because we're Muslim. And I'm like, absolutely not. That never even came to my mind to hate you because you're Muslim. We've always loved you, and I raised my children in the Christian church, and they would never think for a second to hate anybody because they're Muslim. And we have experienced so much love and acceptance among the Muslim culture, sometimes even more than of our own. And so yes, it's right now the way that America appears to be very anti-immigrant and anti-foreigner is really sad, because this country was built on immigrants.
I'm Randy Strauss. I'm an attorney at William & Ivory, where we are today, and I'm very pleased and proud to represent Nabil.
So, Randy, it seems like in this case, what you're saying is basically the policies of the San Jose Police Department were not followed as far as discrimination, that they were discriminatory against him and jokes and all kinds of other things, and yet they didn't even follow their own policies.
Steve, it's even more than that. in the state of California, every employee is protected by the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which says that it is illegal and unlawful to discriminate against somebody based on their religion or their ethnicity or their national origin. It's unlawful to retaliate against somebody who complains of discrimination. It's unlawful to harass somebody because of those characteristics of who they are, where they came from, what they believe in. And so I don't care if it's the police department or this law firm or the restaurant on the corner. This is unlawful behavior. And yes, most good businesses and employers have written policies, but those policies really reflect the law of the state of California.
So why isn't the San Jose Police Department following their own policies and the state policies?
I think they have a racism problem, frankly. I think there's a racism problem that they are not ready to come to grips with. Because as Nabil so eloquently said, what he hoped and expected was the chief would step in and say, not on my watch. This is not okay. And he knew about it right away. And that's what's...
How do you know he knew about it?
Because he engaged Nabil and said, I want to have an investigation. And Nabil went and told Internal Affairs everything that happened to him. The sad part is that nothing came of that investigation. They have a rule within the police department that if a victim comes forward internally from the police department and complains of discrimination, that at the end of the investigation, they sit down with the victim who has complained and they say, have we satisfied your needs in this investigation? Have we taken care of the problem? Have we properly addressed the issues? Do you have any concerns? They have not said one word.
So they're not following their own policies?
In the Internal Affairs investigation, it's been nearly a year and not one word. And in fact, we have filed, first of all, Nabil has filed an Internal Affairs complaint about not just the Veterans Day incident, but also the Martin Luther King Day incident. No investigation results. We have filed a claim against the city of San Jose and its police department. Nothing has happened. We have now filed a lawsuit against the police department. Nothing has happened. And even before we filed the lawsuit, we were required to file a claim with the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. So we have taken all these steps, and where is the police department? Where have they been to accept responsibility for a serious problem, serious issue, and to let Nabil know no more?
And what about the mayor of San Jose and the city council of San Jose? I mean, because they're spending tax dollars basically fighting a lawsuit that they're violating the laws as far as discrimination. I mean, is that costing the people of San Jose money?
Well, it ultimately will cost them money. As this litigation goes forward, they're going to pay for their attorneys and the time and effort of even the police department to sit down for depositions. I'm certainly going to want to talk to them under oath and find out what they're doing and why they are not addressing this. And ultimately, the enforcement mechanism under the Fair Employment and Housing Act are damages in court. Nabil, in some ways, downplays how much this has hit him. And I want to...
Well, I think it's been pretty traumatic. I mean,
it has been traumatic, but I want to emphasize this. Can you imagine going to work every day and being ridiculed not only by your peers, but by those who are supervisors of you because of things about yourself that you cannot change, that is your identity, where you are from, what your religion is, the color of your skin? Can you even imagine that? And I want to put this in the context of the police department, because this is really important to understand. Nabil actually remains an employee of the San Jose Police Department. But what happens is, when you're a police officer and you're serving your community, you put your life on the line each and every day when you go out on the streets, right? And you need to depend on your co-officers to be there for you. If something goes down and you're in a life-threatening situation, you need to know that your other officers have your back. Nabil lost that. He lost that in a profound way when publicly he is humiliated by the top levels of the department, and even after that, they continue to make fun of him, ridicule him. And so at his request, Nabil transferred off the streets, okay? He is now in a different job where he's actually doing recruiting for the San Jose Police Department. And that has come at not only an emotional cost, there's also a financial cost to that Nabil didn't speak of, but it's very real for him and his family. And here's what I mean. When you're on the streets, you have an opportunity to make overtime. When you're in the recruiting department, you do not. And so he's taken a financial hit, but much more important to that, his whole family has taken quite a heavy emotional hit, as you recognize.
Living in San Jose with the cost of living, people have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So this is an ongoing hit that he has taken for standing up and saying this is wrong. And we haven't talked about the retaliation that he has suffered as a result of this. And you might want to ask Nabil about this, but there have been incidents that the police department has brought forward to make his life much more difficult now that he has stepped forward and made these complaints. I'll give you one example. About a year ago, Nabil was involved in a high-speed chase and ended up arresting somebody who had been doing some violent carjackings within the city. Okay, and this was as a result. The arrest was at the end of a high-speed chase where, again, this officer Nabil put his life on the line to protect the citizens of San Jose. And at the end of that chase, the perpetrator ended up smashing his car into a tree and left debris in the roadway. Nabil swerved to avoid that debris, ended up popping his tires on the curb. Okay. His sergeant witnessed the entire incident. His sergeant had nothing bad to say. In fact, he praised Nabil for making this arrest. We get involved in this case. We allege discrimination. And guess what happens? The chief of police has now sent a letter of reprimand to Nabil saying that he destroyed San Jose Police Department property because those tires were popped. And he has placed in his personnel file a letter of reprimand for an incident that happened over a year ago. When did this letter of reprimand come to light? When we're getting ready to file our lawsuit.
So in other words, what you're saying is there further retaliation against Nabil for actually pursuing a lawsuit saying you're not following your own rules.
Absolutely. And that's continuing. Absolutely. And that's wrong.
Isn't that illegal?
Absolutely. You bet it is. Retaliation for complaining about discrimination violates California law.
So they're piling on further illegal retaliation against him for basically trying to protect his rights to be treated equally.
That's a good way to put it.
Shouldn't. No one should go through what I have gone or what I experienced.
And you say you went to school, you graduated from criminology at the California State University. You've gone through training and education. You never expected that in fact this would happen to you?
No, and not in 100 years. When I started my career with the San Jose Police Department, I never thought that someday I'm going to face this kind of discrimination or harassment by command staffs.